Hello and welcome, Senate District 13. Today we're going to tackle a hard topic that's on the minds and hearts of many parents here in the 13th District and many people that I talk to, many friends of mine. And it's especially since the pandemic, we've seen really an increase in our youth struggling with issues of depression, anxiety, sometimes addiction, sometimes suicidal ideation. And this is something that in my own family, we've dealt with. And so many of the questions that I'm going to ask today are questions that I've asked in the past, or maybe questions that I still have. And that's really why I wanted to have this forum here today, because I know that, again, we've gone through it. I know many friends have had struggles with their kids. And again, I know this also accelerated through the pandemic. So just glad to be able to bring this panel of experts here to discuss this with all of you. We had a tremendous response, many questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but hopefully you'll be able to come away with answers to some of your questions and a sense of some of the resources that are out there for you as parents, or if you're a provider yourself, how to make some of these connections. And we'll, this is a dialogue that I'm sure will continue. But I'm really just glad to have everyone here today, because we have to be making this a priority, and I want our kids and our youth to have a optimistic view of the future and look forward to the future. But if you see some of the stats that I'm going to go through right now, you'll see that we're not there yet. And here are some of these stats that have kind of given me sleepless nights. This is from a survey that the ACLU, California Action, and the CSU Center, the State of Student Wellness, did. They said roughly 1/5 of students felt they might be traumatized and not be the same because of the pandemic. Over 63% of students report experienced an emotional meltdown, and 45% of students reported feeling depressed. Only 17% of students after the pandemic felt an increase in mental health services, while others, overwhelming majority, felt they did not experience an increase in access to services. In San Mateo County, we had some stats about increased referrals to behavioral health clinicians. Embedded in primary care increased for adults by 51%. Again, it's not just youth, but by youth by 100%. And just again, across the board, the number of calls to the behavioral health recovery services have increased. And so I know that we can get to a better place, and that we have to, that we owe it to our youth to make this a priority and to just devote as much attention to this as possible. I know that laws alone can't fix this and money alone can't fix this, but I do want to end at the end on a hopeful note. And I will talk at some point about some of the work we've done in the legislature, because we have made this a priority. We have a very strong mental health caucus, and I'll talk about some of the work that we've done around healthcare coverage for parent-child services, around making it easier for schools to provide prevention and treatment, to destigmatize help for kids, trying to make it this accessible for all kids, more resources for parents, and then also the work that we've done to build the mental health workforce. This has been another big priority of ours. A lot of the questions that came in were about providers, just having access to providers. And I do believe there is more out there now, as we'll discuss, but we've also just put a lot of money into the budget, scholarships for school counselors, for another 10,000 school counselors, and other things that we're doing to grow the workforce. So that's a little bit of what I wanted to cover by way of introduction. And now I'd like to introduce our first panelist, and that is David Miklowitz. David is a distinguished professor of psychiatry and director of the Child and Adolescent Mood Disorders Program at the UCLA School of Medicine. He's also a visiting professor of psychiatry at Oxford University in the UK. His research focuses on family environmental factors and family interventions for children, adolescents, and adults with bipolar disorder and youth at high risk for mood disorders or psychosis. And his work has helped establish the effectiveness of psychosocial interventions as adjuncts to medication in the treatment of bipolar disorder across age ranges. So we're going to start with David, and I welcome you here, and hopefully join me here on video. And David, what I wanted to address first is, what have you seen in sort of the especially with the impact of the pandemic, the increase? Tell me what's going on from a descriptive standpoint from what you're seeing.
Well, first, thanks very much for inviting me and for having me on this panel. It's a very important set of topics. And one of the things we know is, first, there are many different categories of child mental illness. There's the anxiety disorders, which tend to be characterized by worry and apprehension. There's depression, which we're all familiar with, the sort of slowing down, negative thinking, sadness, sometimes suicidal ideation. There's bipolar disorder, a little less common, where people go from lows to highs. Schizophrenia, being out of touch with reality, having delusions and hallucinations, and categories like autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. All of those were fairly common before the pandemic. So anxiety disorders, for example, were affected about 32% of our kids. About 15% of kids had major depression. All those things have gone up since the pandemic. So we're now hearing 1 in 4 kids have had a clinically elevated depression during the pandemic. Anxiety, as you mentioned, affects about 45% of kids. Not all of those kids are severely impaired by anxiety, but it's certainly more common than it used to be. But the mental health system hasn't kept pace in terms of being able to provide services during that interval. And it's not only the pandemic. First, as I mentioned, a lot of these problems were there before, but in addition to the pandemic, we've had an increase in racism, recognition of racism, racist policies, the George Floyd incident and similar incidents. We've also had school shootings, more of them, all of which have contributed to mental health problems in kids. So I think this is a very critical time where all of these different presentations are getting more common and are in greater need.
And so, yeah, that gives us a sort of a sense of, thank you for defining some of those terms and differences, make sure we know what we're talking about here. I guess in your, how have you experienced this with your own, both your research and practice in terms of families that you've seen?
Sure. And as you mentioned, my focus is on families and family intervention, how families cope with disorders in their kids. So I direct the Max Gray Child and Adolescent Mood Disorders Program at UCLA. We have a clinic for kids with depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety disorders. And I can tell you that first, we've had many more referrals, which is not surprising during the pandemic. Fortunately, we now offer telehealth, so we can connect with more kids by telehealth than we could before, when they had to come into UCLA and park and all the problems of getting to a major campus. I've seen certainly an increase in school refusal and school anxiety. A lot of kids, especially now that the schools have opened up again, are really afraid to go back to school or are refusing to. That's not something, we saw it before, but not at this rate. Kids are very worried about getting sick, getting hurt. So we're seeing an exacerbation of depression and anxiety. We're seeing more suicidal ideation. more self-cutting, or what we call non-suicidal self-injury, the sort of damaging to oneself of cutting or head banging or any of those sorts of expressions of problems with emotion regulation. And we're seeing more severe illnesses like bipolar disorder and psychosis, much more than we did before, more crises, and families are really trying their best. They're up against a lot. They're, trying to access services. Some have been successful, but, there are tremendous differences in terms of income, in terms of access to services. Families are understandably very worried. How do I take care of this kid who doesn't want to go to school? How do I get them the proper treatment? I have a job, and I have other kids, and it's a really chaotic situation, I think, for parents.
And we'll talk, I mean, a lot of this conversation will be geared towards resources, whether it be in the school, whether it be in the community, government resources. I mean, do you have any general advice for parents as they begin to think about accessing resources and treatments? Any guidance there?
Yeah. Well, first I would say, it can be difficult to know when a kid has problems that really require psychiatric intervention or psychologist versus they're the sort of problems of growing up. And that's, I think, something that parents struggle with. When is this a teenage mood swing or a problem with just getting along in the world, and when is it a psychiatric problem? What I would be looking for is, first, has there been a change in behavior where a kid who used to be social is now very withdrawn, or seems to be worried all the time, or doesn't want to interact with family members, or is saying bizarre things, or seems to have unusual beliefs? Those are telltale signs. And often depression, anxiety takes the form of withdrawal from family activities, or being up late at night, anxiously pacing around, or not being able to do schoolwork. When you're really seeing an impairment in behavior, I think is when you want to go the next step and get an evaluation. You don't immediately go to putting the kid on medications, but you want to get a diagnostic evaluation first at your local mental health center, or if you're able to afford private rates, then through a private psychiatrist. You need to be looking for mental health professionals that specialize in the kinds of problems you're seeing in the kid: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, ADHD. And you need to be patient. There's going to be times it's going to be hard to get appointments right away. Sometimes you can, sometimes you have to wait a bit. And also, if you decide to go with medication as an option, they don't necessarily work right away. You have to give it time, these things time to balance. Think about psychotherapy as well as medication. If the kid is bad off, you may want to start with therapy and not immediately go to medications. But usually our interventions, particularly for kids who are very severely ill, involve a certain amount of school intervention, therapist intervention, and certainly family involvement and community involvement, particularly if there's suicidality or one of these more severe expressions.
So I think that's very helpful. Yeah, no, that's extremely helpful. And we'll talk about this this more later, I think, when we talk about some of the interventions. But just mention for a moment here, you've done some work and are doing research just on kind of lifestyle fixes too, just around diet and sleep. Did you want to comment on those quickly?
Yeah. Well, first, I think every mental health problem in a kid has to involve the family. The family needs to come in and be part of treatment. That doesn't mean every therapy has to be family therapy, but it's important that the family is involved in an interchange with the mental health professional to know what's going on, maybe attend some sessions, support the kid, give background that the kid may not be able to talk about. So the involvement of both parents is critical. Second, one of the things we know about teenagers in particular is they have a lot of trouble with sleep anyway. They tend to be phase advanced, which means they are more naturally likely to stay up later and get up later, which doesn't necessarily mesh with the school day. So they're going to be tired a lot. getting them to bed at a reasonable hour. And if they're having trouble with sleep, working with them on some behavioral sleep solutions, which may involve such things as turning off the phone or turning off the stereo or less lighting in the room, more comfortable bed. Any of those things can be important for sleep. But regular sleep-wake cycles, not binge eating. I think we've seen that kids can really show wild emotional mood swings as a result of eating, or turn to emotional eating to cope with uncomfortable emotions. And that, of course, can lead to health problems and weight gain. And other kids self-starve when they're under stress and won't eat, or develop a negative relationship with food. So paying attention to the kids' dietary habits is a very important factor. Exercise is one of the best treatments we have for anxiety and depression, especially if they're not severe. If a kid can get a certain amount of regular exercise, that's very critical. And one thing we're exploring more and more is meditation, because meditation is both effective, especially for anxiety and depression. Not everybody likes to do it. Not every teenager takes to it, but when it's effective, it's very effective. And that's one of the things you can do as a family, is have a meditation hour once in a while. And some families really do well with that. So yeah, I think lifestyle changes are very critical here.
Yeah. And again, I'll say from my experience, you might have a kid who's not open to maybe one of those things at one point, but then becomes open to, say, something like, meditation or another therapy, over time.
Sure.
So
And I think also, just to add on to that, often it's a friend who says, I meditate every night when I'm freaked out or when I'm anxious. Sometimes if they hear that from a friend, they're more willing to try it out.
yeah. Good. Well, I want to move on. Just one last, someone wrote in, can you clarify more about what characteristics market belief is unusual, indicative of anxiety or depression? Any comment on that?
What is unusual? Oh, a belief is unusually indicative of anxiety. Okay. Irritability is often a sign of anxiety and depression. We tend to write off irritability as, oh, you're having a bad day, and therefore you're taking it out on your family instead of your friends. But irritability sometimes is masking depression and anxiety. Withdrawal is a very consistent sign of depression. Excessive worrying, self-cutting can be a sign of anxiety and depression. Negative thinking, or becoming very preoccupied with morbid things, shooting, killing, or reading about suicide. Those are often very worrisome signs in kids who are having a tough time. Sleeping a lot is a sign of depression. Negative self-talk, being fatigued, coming home from school and wanting to sleep. That's a sign of depression. There's no one sort of signature, but usually we look for depression, sad mood, loss of interests in things, and a general slowing down of the nervous system as telltale for depression. But teenagers don't come out and say, I'm sad, I'm depressed. They more often say, I'm bored, I'm pissed off, I'm irritable, things that don't necessarily jump to depression in one's mind.
Well, thank you. Another question, which is a good transition, which was around, can we look at having teachers and those that deal with children to be trained in youth mental health first aid? And we actually did have a bill around this, and training those who interact with teachers, so we act with our kids to be better prepared. And I think that's a good segue. We're going to bring up Mariko, who is an expert in this topic of working with schools. And I'm going to bring up her full bio here for a moment. Mariko is also a council member for the town of Los Gatos and served as mayor twice in 2017 and 2021. She's a community advocate that has dedicated her career to making positive impacts on social and environmental justice issues. She's the executive director of CASI, which is Counseling and Support Services for Youth. And this is a nonprofit that partners with Bay Area schools to provide resources and professional on-campus mental health services to students free of charge. And so how it works and how parents can sort of find out about these resources.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for having this very important topic. So Cassie Counseling and Support Services for Youth was created in 2009. It's a nonprofit that was created by two former mental health therapists that wanted to provide direct services onto a campus. So our philosophy is that we receive that counseling. They could be referred so that there could be the assessment and the diagnosis. And then that evaluation, but we're also on campus to be that psychoeducation partner for teachers and for staff, so that if there are areas of concern that a school teacher or school administrators have, our therapists can be there to do the crisis intervention, or if there's a threat assessment that needs to happen, or if it's simply just psychoeducation training for students, for faculty, or for the parents through parent education. So it's a master of all trades in many ways, but really trying to be that thought partner for schools as more and more community members look to school.
You know, I'm concerned a bit about my my child, and then the student counselor then referred to Cassie. Is that often how it happens?
Correct. Each school will create what's best for their school community.
And do you see, and then like in this case, that was sort of sufficient, I think, for the child, but then in other cases, does Cassie then refer them to, if someone says, hey, I need more of a full-time or, regular a therapist, can you recommend therapists, or can you recommend additional action, or how does that work?
Sure. We try to, once someone is referred to Cassie, we'll do an assessment and a diagnosis with the family. Just want to clarify that everything requires parental consent, and refer them out. There are some schools that have an agency called Care Solace that provides that seeking of which therapist in the area has space, but we also have our own network. And so we try to do the warm handoff based on what we know of that child and the skills that they require. Now, obviously, and I know that this is something that you're going to be discussing, there's a lack of therapists right now. And so really trying to, how do we triage until that child and that family has the services, outside services they need?
I mean, two questions about self-refer. Can kids self-refer to a program like Cassie?
Yes, absolutely. At a high school, we do have a lot of drop-ins, especially if it's something as, I just need to sit for a while. Absolutely, we can do that with wellness centers. When they're minors, elementary, especially kindergarten, that's where we definitely want to work with the school staff and with the family. There are some that requires a bigger team and a bigger conversation, but absolutely, if anyone is ever concerned, if a parent's concerned, we've had lots of parents call directly to Cassie, and then we work with the school to figure out how we put them on our caseload.
Got it. And then do Cassie counselors circle back with the parents once they speak with the kids? We had a question on that.
Yes. So the assessment is done with the family, that we identify the treatment goals. And then as we near progress, we give parents constant communication with where we're at, particularly if it looks like we're meeting those goals, and or we may have to do a different treatment plan. So there's lots of conversations along the way.
And we had a request in the Q&A for contact info. Someone to reach Cassie directly. What is the best way to do that?
It's Cassie, CASSY, bayarea.org. And I'd be happy to put that in the chat as well.
Okay, great. We are going to have a whole, part of doing this town hall was to really identify a whole range of resources, and we'll certainly discuss that with Chelsea Bonini as well, and Mary, our next speaker. So we have a whole bunch of resources we will be sending out to people. Two last questions. We'll go to the next speaker. We had a question about eating disorders and also about 5150 scenarios with kids in schools. Are either those questions that um, sort of feel prepared to answer, that things that you see?
Sure. I mean, we definitely see eating disorders, and unfortunately, we're seeing it younger and younger. That is an area that we would actually refer out. What we often try to do, think of it almost like your primary care physician. What can we as a general practice take care of on a campus? And then is there a specialty that we need to refer you out to? And so for parents, that is helpful, because it's difficult to navigate through the system, and we're there to help be your advocate and champion for that. 5150, unfortunately, we do a lot of crisis and a lot of 5150s on a campus nowadays. Again, that's where we can be that partner for the school, do that assessment, and figure out how best to not only remove the child, but when the child is ready to come back to school, how to do the reentry so that it's a successful reentry.
Yeah, yeah, really intense stuff. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm going to bring up Mary, and then we'll bring you all back for continued discussion. But I'm going to introduce Mary Cheryl Gloner. She serves as the Chief Executive Officer for Project Safety Net, which is a collective impact organization dedicated to youth resiliency, mental health promotion, and suicide prevention. With a long history in the nonprofit and public sectors, her career is focused on community health, education, promotion, policy, administration, research, and equity. So Mary, thank you for joining us. And we'll go to you hopefully on the video here as well, if everyone can see you. But tell us a little bit about Project Safety Net. What was the impetus for it, and how has it evolved?
First and foremost, I have to thank you, Senator Becker, for being a champion of this issue and really using your platform for the community, especially as we close out September Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And secondly, I want to thank all of those that are in the audience that are taking the time to take this information in whatever capacity, whether you're still getting comfortable with the topic or want to be that caring adult or just want to be heard as a young person. I'm so honored. While I am the CEO of Project Safety Net, I really come here also wearing the lived experience hat of a child of Filipino immigrants that had supported and observed their own navigation of the San Mateo County and Santa Clara County behavioral health system. Also, throughout my life, I'm not a mental health, behavioral health specialist. I'm a community health educator. That's who I am. And what drew me to Project Safety Net was to be able to make mental health, behavioral health, just through my presence, accessible to our diverse community, especially our immigrant community, and just really showing that when we talk about mental health, it's not about just at the end stage of crisis and suicide ideation, but also just normalizing that when we're feeling stressed or depressed or anxious, that these are all things that all of us experience, and that there are resources and support. What brought life to Project Safety Net, and it's sort of parallels of what we always educate our young people. It's about resiliency, right? When we have setbacks, or even our community dealt with trauma or tragedy, how do we build upon that and make that a strength? So about 10, 12 years ago, some of you know this who are here in this town hall, is that in Palo Alto, the community was struck with a cluster of youth suicide. And like with any community, people were in pain, reacting. But what was wonderful about this this community is like it brought in a lot of the strengths. You had the faith community, you had the school systems, you had government, you had youth behavior, youth leaders, youth members, parents coming together to say, how can we support our young people? And what it started out was reacting and really taking advantage of sort of like what we're doing in managing the pandemic. Where are our strengths? And as the work looked at focusing on various capacities and areas because you had people coming from different sectors. You looked at how do we build the mental health infrastructure so that mental health services were accessible to our young people, where finances and wait times would not be a barrier. But then also raising awareness and normalizing and talking about when we are in a place of distress or when we're not able to talk to or we see a young person struggling, how can we talk to them as well as keeping in mind for our own challenges that we're dealing with. But then also, how can legislators make it accessible so that there is funding and being able to have resources to crisis lines as well as curricula that can help share those tools. But also, more importantly, as you can see, to build infrastructure within the school systems, because while Project Safety Net focuses on the broader community, as we know, other than being at the home or at a recreational or even the faith community, schools is where many of our young people are congregating. So when that happened, a lot of that work, while it was focused in Palo Alto, really infused and many of the work has permeated throughout South San Mateo County, North Santa Clara County, but even beyond. If you may know that uh, there was more important work to do. As a result, many of the community members felt that while the city of Palo Alto and the school district and many youth serving organizations who helped found Project Safety Net felt it was important to suicide in Santa Clara County, which actually provides some seminal information that helped amplify all the important work that many of our grassroots, small based community organizations were doing, as well as really building some infrastructure and some of the legislation that Senator Becker. So where we are now as Project Safety Now is in our third year as a independent nonprofit. We're still growing and maturing and doing this in the heat of many of our communities, especially young people saying, um, because many of our partners don't just serve in Palo Alto, they serve beyond. And so our hope is to not only continue a lot of the capacity building awareness, but really be sort of that mobilizing place for community and really normalize all the aspects of how everyone can be involved and really look at youth mental health and suicide from a not only from a child and student perspective, but from the school perspective, but the community. And how can we coordinate more together in a way so that there are less be people left out and that we address areas where there are populations, whether it's inequities of resources or cultural perspective, that becomes something that we all could be part of.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that explanation for the work. Um, what? How can students um, and parents access Project Safety Net? And as you mentioned, it is Suicide Prevention Month in September. Thank you for mentioning that. How can we? Is there a time when parents need to feel, oh, now we need this service, or is it, and how can parents access it?
What is very challenging with Project Safety Net, because if we do our work really well, we're more of a backbone, right? Because it's about elevating work like CASI or ALCO, which is another model where it's a center, a hub for young people who can self-refer, and it's centralized, or even um, uh, sources of strength program at one of the high schools or with the PTA. So what we like to say is that Project Safety Net for young people, for parents, if there is a clinical service or if there's a training program or if there's something that they learned about some research they heard, they come to us and we connect them. We're like that resourcer. If it's for partner organizations, there might be, for instance, the behavioral health serving organizations might have some questions about how can we address our intensive outpatient program. Many of us have niches, whether it's serving youth who are dealing with substance use or work with the LGBTQ or are part of a comprehensive long-term, but like how we all can not be competitors but work together. But I think for one part, where we've seen youth and parents really elevate is that we help to be sort of support and amplifying their voice. There are many parent advocates, like you'll hear later from Chelsea, who have that voice. But there are some parents that, for whatever reason, are not able to have that space. And we try to be that conduit so that they can have their power. What I appreciate about the Evolution Project Safety Net very early on, when I would talk to each young person, I said, "What is Project Safety Net to you?" I said, "It's a bunch of adults and teachers who really care about our health." But the
Yeah.
reality, none of them did say it was them. But it has evolved little by little in the grassroots, in the sense that young people who are interested in elevating youth mental health, whether it's just a casual conversations, come to us and say, how can you provide technical sense? How can we connect? How can we speak at a town hall or legislation and have voice? So I think
Yeah.
that's the direction we're going now that we're independent nonprofit, is to really be that mobilizer and finding those moments of momentum.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I want to bring up Chelsea, but just before we go, so how do people contact you? To go to Project Safety Net, to the website, or, I mean, you
Yes.
mentioned you work through all these other organizations as well. And what was Alcove? Did you say Alcove?
Yes, well, there's one, and I would be remiss if we never, but www.psnyouth.org is our landing page. But if you also do /resources and /, you'll get a whole list of various mental health services, some that serve South San Mateo County. I know someone referenced the Youth Mental Health First Aid, and actually that is a program that Project Safety Net, in partnership with Momentum for Health and San Mateo County, will be embarking to do some more direct service, because
Yeah.
many services are available within the schools, but our role is, how do we make it available outside the schools, right? And where we can bring that.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard a lot. Well, let's come back to that later if we have time with the youth mental health first aid. There's so much topics to discuss here, but that's something I've heard. I would love to discuss a little bit more. And again, thank you for your efforts. And we are continuing to get questions coming in. We will try to address these. Well, Chelsea comes up. I'll mention, a couple of things. We are getting a lot of questions around social media, and we may do really a follow-up on that, because it is an issue, and certainly we've had some legislation around this as well, around social media, because we do see that nexus. We have questions about gender identity. We have a lot of topics that kind of come up, and again, we're going to try to get to everything. But I want to bring up Chelsea. Chelsea, you are on the Behavioral Health Commission in San Mateo County. You also sort of come to this as a parent and accessing resources. But first, tell us about the Behavioral Health Commission. And when you and I were talking, you said you have seen an increase in some additional resources, especially school-based resources. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit as well. But talk to what is the Behavioral Health Commission? What does it do? What's its role?
Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you all today.
Well, I should mention you were also on the County Board of Education. So you have a number of very relevant hats for this, but sorry, go ahead.
Lots of hats. So I can tell you a little bit about the commission, but primarily the work that I do there and throughout the community, it's really based on my personal experience of navigating this system and just finding the gaps as I've gone along, and not and feeling lucky that I've been able to learn as I've gone. There are a lot of gaps, but I have seen so much improvement. So just to address your specific questions, the Behavioral Health Commission is a commission that is, I think every county has a similar commission. It functions under the Mental Health Services Act, which is Prop 63. And it essentially brings funds to each county that the Board of Supervisors, can allocate. It comes through a plan that this commission actually sort of is parallel to, and we have input. And then there's also steering committees and things that derive that funding. So we have different committees. I serve on the Youth Services Committee for that commission.
Okay, great. And again, is this role, is it do you see the role, is it really more school focused, or is it just general resources? And how does it interact with organizations like NAMI and others that are working in the area?
Right. So the commission is community based. My other focus being a member of the County Board of Education and a parent, a prior board member in San Mateo Foster City, is really focused on how our schools interact with that system. So it's a big network. One of the programs, or I would say initiatives, that we're working on right now through the commission is to create a parent and caregiver roadmap, which addresses what I believe is the most important inquiry that parents have, and that I hear the most from parents is, where do I begin? Who do I talk to? What are the entry points into getting services, or finding out if this is an issue, as Dr. Mikulowicz noted, is this typical, or should I be worried? These are the questions parents have. And then when we're talking about, the goal for that is to identify the entry points, the barriers, the questions parents should ask, and then the pathways. That's a super important inquiry. Additionally, this works if our community is aware of the issues. And I would say there's a lot of discussion around how the pandemic has impacted this. And I think some of the statistics show we were already in a mental health crisis before the pandemic, but it's, as with many things, it's just been shown to be more, it's been unearthed, or it's been revealed that, and there have been traumas as well, right? And so, we really, really need to make sure that all the points in the system know what all the resources are. So your point about identifying what those are, and that being a kind of an outcome of this discussion as well, is super important. A lot of the resources that I've shared have been mentioned already. One that I'd like to highlight is one that a couple people have mentioned, which is the teen mental health first aid. You go through that training and you become a mental health first aider. There's also an adult version, and I've actually done that. So I'm an adult mental health first aider. I plan to do the other one. But it's available to everyone in the community. And there's a push right now through the Office of Education and partnering with schools to really get teachers to do this. And what it does is it gives on the ground those who are directly in contact with our students those tools. And it doesn't mean that you become a professional, but it gives you the information to look for, the signs, the behavior changes, those types of things, and then what to do. And I'm just looking at my little list here, but teachers are engaging in this. School professionals, coaches, parents can sign up for it. It's free. And so there's some information that I shared with you offline that our Behavioral Health Commission and Office of Diversity and Equity for San Mateo County is spearheading getting that out. And I think they've trained thousands of people already, but they want to train the whole county. So that's one to really highlight.
Yeah, that's great. And it reminds me, there's a mayor mental health initiative. I know, remember, mayors of cities in the peninsula have gotten together, and I think that's where I first heard about the mental health first aid.
Yeah, cities are sponsoring that as well. That was, a number of cities signed on to that initiative. And so I think if we can say that anything, positive came out of this past few years, it's that there's been a normalization of these conversations. Kids are talking about these issues more. Parents are feeling empowered to at least ask the questions, because when you want to get help for your child, you have to be an advocate in some ways, right? You have to have the knowledge. Knowledge is that connector. So you have to be, feel comfortable talking to the teachers, talking to the school. If you don't get the responses, that you don't get the answers, reach out more, right? And so there's also this huge initiative right now, I would say, across the board, all the organizations that I work with, that we're focused on the youth perspective, the youth advocacy, empowering our youth to actually reach out or support each other, to mentor each other. And for the Behavioral Health Commission, our Youth Services Committee, by youth involvement, spearheaded a youth action board, and they specifically called themselves an action board, not an advisory board, because they're taking action. They want to see change. There was an application process, but these boards of students are all over, in many of these organizations, and it's really their vision that's going to help solve, the access. All
That's
code.
good. And I do see at my kids' high school. And again, my personal, I have two kids in high school during the pandemic, and so again, I saw a lot of this all firsthand. But there is a youth mental health, kind of peer support now at our high school, which I think is.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So I envision, and I actually, hope that expands, but I think every school probably has its own version of probably student-led, right? And that example of Alcove, it's student designed, student-led. There's a pending, I couldn't find the opening date as it's been updated, but Peninsula Healthcare District is spearheading that in San Mateo County to open a site in San Mateo. And it's really that place, as was described earlier, where students can go, right, and get the support, having, counselors and peers and anything they need, honestly. And it's really based on their own connections.
Well, thank you. Let's bring everyone back up now. We'll, for the next 20, 30 minutes, I gave in a discussion. Maybe someone could people are questioning how Alcove is spelled, so maybe someone could put that in there. Shawnice, who's one of our trustees in Sequoia High School District, wrote about Safe Space, which is another thing I've heard great things about. And it's a program across the Bay Area, youth-led, mental health-focused organization that empowers young people. Jeffrey wrote about the YMHFA that gives a response plan, kind of like a CPR for mental health issues, and does a lot of work, particularly in East Palo Alto. And he had a question about why is there a lack of therapists, and particularly therapists of color. And maybe we can discuss that a little bit too. I mentioned earlier, one of our big initiatives this year is to increase, to add another 10,000 school counselors. So we have grants up to $20,000 for people that want to pursue that and become a school counselor. But in general, the mental health workforce is an area we deeply need to grow. So please keep putting more resources in there. I know, again, people continue to ask, just about where do you start? And I heard about a new platform, ShineTogether.com, which is launching in a few weeks. So Shine Together will be a platform to connect parents and caregivers of struggling teens together. So that's something also to be on the lookout for, good things about. So now we've got everyone sort of back on. I'll ask if maybe David start with you, since we've had you were the first. But we've had a lot of discussion since then. Anything that you want to comment on that?
Sure.
Has kind of come up for you? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think when I spoke, I mentioned enough about eating disorders, and I noticed that there was a couple of questions about that. And I mentioned binge eating. What I didn't mention, I think, is anorexia. And there's been an incredible increase in anorexic, self-starving behavior since the pandemic. And I think that's, kids have been sort of locked at home and are getting very preoccupied with the social media images of being beautiful and starving themselves. And they get very preoccupied with their diet. And measuring out their food very carefully, and becomes almost like an obsession. And it's a short pathway, I think, from that to self-starvation, where they're really not eating enough to really survive on. And I think that, it was mentioned that it's hard to find a therapist. There are some helplines that I think are first steps. You never want to rely only on a helpline for a kid who has a severe eating disorder. But a first step would be something like the NIDA Feeding Hope line, which I'll put in the chat. It's an 800 number you can call. for crisis support for eating disorders. And that's, of course, something that affects girls more than boys. And it's been an issue in our culture for God knows how long, but made worse by the pandemic.
Yes. Well, thank you for that, for mentioning that specifically and adding in a resource for that. I should mention, we had a bill carried by my colleague, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, to establish our 988 line. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on the 988, but that's a program that really had to be implemented here in the States. And so, on an individual basis, and we've done that now this year. So that'll be a 24/7 a line available 24/7 for support, and should be a great place to start as well. I don't know if anyone has any commentary on that.
Josh, I would just comment that in San Mateo County, Star Vista's Youth SOS is officially launched, and serving in that capacity as well, taking in those calls. And it is one thing I wanted to note, sort of align with what David said, is that there are resources that are warm lines or hotlines. Anyone can really call those lines and ask questions or express concern and get answers. So I did not realize that initially. So if I'm a parent and I just want to ask a question, but it's the teen line, I might be able to get some more information or guidance just by calling those numbers, not being in a moment of crisis.
Yeah. And say that again, Chelsea. That was the Star Vista.
The Star Vista Youth SOS. It's the Youth Stabilization Opportunity and Support Team. It's 24/7 now, which is great. And they have some family follow-up services, and Star Vista is really a key partner in San Mateo County.
And
I just want to, I was going to add that for 988, we can be very proud that both San Mateo and Santa Clara County are the two counties that are invested and have the navigation site, where in other regions they have to be referred. So that commends our leadership. And what Star Vista also is offering is they will be launching a mobile health services, which is to sort of the counterpart of Santa Clara County's Pacific Clinics, which was formerly Uplift. So I know there's a lot of organizations that we did not mention that have been youth-led, like Adolescent Counseling Services. They are the lead when it comes to LGBTQ and transgender and in scene two. And so while Project Safety Net's
say that again, Mary.
Adolescent Counseling Services. I also want to say that Safe Space is modeled after the Australia Alcove, and it was driven by parents, leaders who couldn't wait for the bureaucracy of getting this model here. And so through their leadership, you have Safe Space. But just letting you know that even though we have not mentioned every single, and there's so many, know that that if you go to our resource list, many of the people are there. And what Alcove does, it's not only focusing on mental health, it's also primary care, education, as well as job. It's all about all the social determinants of aspects that can make a young person resilient. So it's a wonderful model. Another mobile services. So Alcove in Palo Alto is active. And for those who live in South San Mateo County, it's available too, or even those who want to just see what it's like. And while the one in East Palo Alto, South San Mateo County or San Mateo County, they're still launching. But I just pointing that out, that one of the challenges is that the dividing of the counties, and how can we cross those bridges more and be able to have those services. And many of the youth serving organizations serve beyond county lines, but it does vary. So I'll stop there because I'm going over.
Yeah, well, that's very helpful. Thank you. And I want to mention, Chelsea, NAMI. Do you want to talk about NAMI? I know NAMI is a great resource. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, I can mention. So NAMI has a number of programs for families and for those who are consider themselves a peer, who want to connect with others, in connections groups. That's one of the programs that they run, and primarily they are for older. They're not for kids. So I think older teenagers and adults primarily participate in the programs. They do have a high school program that is in, I think, a couple of our schools. But it's really a great resource. There's a warm line that runs and really, provides a lot of information. There are just so many great resources in our county, and NAMI is definitely one of those.
Okay.
If I could add, in addition to NAMI, there is the Depressive and Bipolar Support Alliance, which is called the DBSA. I'll put that in the chat as well. It's a little bit like NAMI, but oriented more towards depression and manic depression. And it has both teen groups and parent groups, and a lot of peer counseling, advocacy for getting medication management, information, seminars. It's really a wonderful organization and available nationwide, both live and online.
Great. Well, thank you. I know a lot of resources we're getting in here, which is great. Anyone else see anything they would like to comment on in the Q&A or the chat? Someone asked, if my child is getting treatment for depression, should I let the school know? If anyone has any thought on that.
I'd be curious what others think, but to me, the question is, what is the purpose of letting the school know? What do you want the school to do? There is the issue that the kid may not want the school to know that they're depressed, or their peers to know, or their teachers to treat them any differently. On the other hand, a school could be an incredible help if the kid is suicidal or showing a deterioration in functioning. So I think if you want to let the school know, first you should have a purpose in mind, and you should be talking to the school counselors, not necessarily immediately the teachers, because they're more in a position to help and advocate for the child. But I'd be curious whether, Mariko in particular, whether you agree.
Yeah, oftentimes if we are seeing students that have a therapist outside, we are their conduit. We share information. That information is signed by the family that we can share, so that we are aware of what they are working on, and if there is something we need to do on campus to make sure that child is safe, we are the ones that would protect that confidentiality and work with school staff. So it's on a case-by-case basis. Again, to what the doctor said, it's what is the goal of sharing. We always want to make sure it's always clinically appropriate. So,
if I could just chime in as well. I respect all of the confidentiality and, of course, the desire of students and parents to share that medical information. But I would just note that the schools are tasked with providing such services for the students. They have a mental health role through the educational related mental health services and their the multi-tiered systems of support that are in place. And so that should be a safe place to share that information. Students might have rights under our disabilities laws, under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and potentially protections and accommodations that they might receive in classes. So this is a really common question. Parents often, I come from this as a parent who has fully embraced that the mental health disability that my child has is a disability, and the rights that he has to supports are derived from acknowledging that and normalizing that, and that is not negative at all. It is a part of who he is. And that is sort of a message throughout the disabilities community and a lot of the work I do on that front. So just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, absolutely. And I thank you for mentioning that, because we want to destigmatize that if you are suffering from a depression or from any illness, right, whether it's physical or mental, that you shouldn't be you should not use that as something to hide or to ask for support. I think with all of this, what I encourage everyone is to be as communicative as possible, but understanding that it takes a while to build trust, and how to, regardless of which provider is on campus, how do we honor and respect the trust that parents, students are giving to us when they are sharing that they are struggling and that they need support, and that they feel that that help and that support will be reciprocated in a manner that gives them dignity. And I think for all of us in the profession, there's tons of resources. We have to make sure we do our best.
Yeah, thank you both for that. For Dr. Miklowitz, there was a question around guidelines for how long a child should be evaluated before signing a diagnosis or prescribing medicine, and that brings up a few other questions I might have. But any thoughts on that?
Well, that's a really good question, and there aren't guidelines as to how. Is it the question about how long it should take or how intensive the evaluation is? Because that varies considerably in the community. In my clinic, for example, we go through a 4 to 5 session diagnostic evaluation before we even prescribe any medications or therapy. We want to make sure we know, is it just depression or is it also ADHD? Is there an anxiety component? Does a kid have an autism spectrum disorder? All those things have to be evaluated before you come in with the medications. Medication is not always the first choice. Sometimes we go with psychotherapy first. The medications could be antidepressants, they could be antipsychotics, they could be anti-anxiety medications. You have to do a full psychiatric and medical evaluation before you come in with those. So for example, just to give an example that comes up a lot in my own work, kids who have bipolar disorder sometimes present with just depression as teenagers. So they look just like garden variety depression. But if you give them an antidepressant, then they can cycle them upwards into mania. And you can start seeing manic behavior, grandiosity, delusional thinking, even those very severe signs of bipolar disorder. And if you haven't taken a good family history and known that bipolar disorder runs in the family, you can give the wrong medication and end up with a real mess. So when an evaluation is done, we want to make sure that that kind of information is covered before prescriptions are given.
That kind of brings up the issue of, are we over medicating? I know it's hard to obviously generalize. I know we were talking, right now, people can only get reimbursed for medicine or for therapy, not for, say, for example, recommending lifestyle changes like we talked about a little bit earlier. And I think there's some research being done at Stanford now to look at particularly keto diets or low carb diets and bipolar, right? And some positive indications there from that, research that's ongoing. But again, a therapist wouldn't get compensated, say, for recommending that right now. I don't know what to say on that. I know I'm gonna continue to look at that issue. But
can I just add, Senator, that I think it is partly the job of therapists to be thinking about those lifestyle modifications like keto diets or other types of diets that may be helpful, exercise. There's no reason that just because you're a psychotherapist, you can't also be talking about helpful lifestyle changes, which really requires that the therapist be up on the literature about what's helpful and what are some of the alternative treatments, like sleep-wake cycle stabilization is one thing we're working on a lot more in bipolar disorder, separate from medications. Do I think medications are overprescribed? Yes, I think that is true because we're a quick fix society. I think we always want what's going to work right away. And we sometimes think that's going to be medications. It's not always. I think some of you probably saw the New York Times article just the other day about a kid that was on 8 or 9 medications while she was a teenager. And sometimes that's driven by parents. Sometimes it's driven by doctors. And we need to, I think whenever a kid is getting over medicated, you need a second opinion. You need to come into second doctor and say, are all these medications necessary, or is one fighting the side effects of another?
Yeah. Well, kids can sort of diagnose themselves as adults do now, going into doctors. That's one thing. That, you know, there's a lot of information out there, which is good, but you sometimes have kids also saying, "Hey, I have this disorder,
Yes.
this disorder," which they may very well have. But again, needs to be checked out in a comprehensive way, I think, as you said, and hopefully some of these other resources that we mentioned do that. I want to mention one other resource, which is Awake DBT in San Jose. They do groups really for learned skills. So I think it's for maybe kids are a little more involved in sort of the therapy process of maybe have been through some therapy, but then have kind of a group setting virtually now to learn skills together, really coping skills. A lot of this is just kind of lifestyle skills that really is helpful to anyone, but particularly with kids that may have anxiety and you know could you know need to learn some of that interactive skills in terms of emotions and how to deal in group settings. Thank you. Crisis text line, actually. Yeah, I know that's another great resource that someone put in there. And I was talking to a friend who was actually one of the founders, and she's, you know, but someone was saying that, you know, a lot of kids today they're anxious to order pizza, let alone call for help. So, but they will text. So a text line, you know, is important.
I'd love to add that also. Sure. Sometimes people might be in dangerous situations where they can't risk being heard. They're talking on a phone line, and especially if you're being isolated, right?
Right.
But you can text quietly and so forth. Later on, when the opportunity presents itself, I would love to talk about like the spectrum of um, normalizing stigma and all the various awareness programs. I know we talked a lot about youth mental health first aid, but there are others, but also just sort of like identifying some of the challenges of how do you make awareness programs accessible and what we can do.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Okay. So Chelsea is wonderful, and one of the strengths of our county behavioral health system is they have these resources where they can help invest and collaborate with other institutions like County Office of Education to get these trainings. And youth mental health first aid, along with adult mental health first aid, also an Australian model that was brought to the United States, were critical, but that just focuses on the caring adults around young people. There is some of it in Spanish, but there are also a new curricula which Project Safety Net is piloting more in North County, and we hope that if it's very successful, it's called the Teen Mental Health First Aid. It uses the foundational pieces of youth mental first aid, but it's a very systems-oriented approach where not only the young people who are teens are being trained from 15 to 18-year-old or 10th to 12th grade, but simultaneously the adults around them, whether it's the school or community-based organization, even in their family, are being trained on youth mental health first aid. And then the third component is developing a safety plan so that when young people are activating or that there's a warm handoff, whether it's a behavioral health organization such as Cassie or other that's on site or that's connected, so that it's a very system oriented. What I also notice and understand is that a lot of these awareness programs are still in English, and there's been a lot of advocacy a long time. I do want to acknowledge and appreciate the County of San Mateo Behavioral Health had piloted with Palo Alto University Be Bold series of trainings where that really look at how to talk about suicide and mental health for the Chinese community, the Filipino community, and so forth. So the reality of with these awareness trainings, there is a whole compendium, even to one that helps educate and tool people with how to assist people in intervention in a moment of suicide, where as a layperson, and as well as a 1 hour of just understanding what questions to ask, how do you persuade and refer. The challenge and systemically is that when you do it in a school system, you're competing with the time that teachers want to teach their student. And we need to find a way where we're not competing, where it becomes part of like onboarding new staff, onboarding PTAs, council leadership. It's part of the curricula as in the beginning, and then being mindful that a 1 hour is good for raising awareness, but how do you sustain that and continue that, and how do you reach people beyond the school? So I think there needs some more work on that tier one prevention, mass awareness, as well as the more specialized and group. I think the more investment, and I think we're getting in that direction, but that is not happening yet. It's still in silos. And a lot of people are being left out. But I hope in 3 to 5 years that won't be the case anymore.
Well,
Build on something that Mary was saying.
yeah,
Suicidality is really a community problem. It's not an individual problem. One of my colleagues, Jonas Sarno, talks about a community seatbelt approach for suicidality. Just like the seatbelts prevented people from dying of car accidents, you really need a community seatbelt around suicidality, which involves not only parents, but also schools and friends and organizations like the one that Mary is talking about. The kid needs to hear from multiple sources that people care about them staying alive and understand their pain, and is not trying to argue with them or talk them out of it, but to understand and normalize it. And very powerful in terms of preventing suicide and teaching some of the emotion regulation techniques you were alluding to, Senator.
yeah,
How to deal with severe emotions that come up during those times.
yeah.
Can I add
Chelsea,
one more
looks like-
detail?
Yeah, Chelsea, looks like you had something. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to, first of all, I wanted to thank Mary for mentioning those programs and trainings in San Mateo County. One of those, and these are culturally diverse, sensitive trainings that are developed through the Office of, or run through the Office of Diversity and Equity through BHRS and County Health. One is Be Sensitive, Be Brave for mental health. And one is Be Sensitive, Be Brave for suicide prevention. And both of these are meant similarly to the mental health, the other ones we mentioned, to help the friends and community members see the signs and be able to help friends and family members and community members in times of crisis, and be able to connect them. So there definitely is a need for more diverse, broad-based programs. I also know that one of the goals of NAMI right now is to really reach out to a more diverse community throughout the different segments of our county, at least for NAMI San Mateo County, because we aren't doing that as well as we could be. And there are also, different acceptance of that within different cultures. It's a very important discussion.
Yeah. You remind me, I was at ALAS, which does incredible work with farm workers on the coast. We have a lot of farm workers in San Mateo County, and the mental health is just not addressed. And Belinda, who runs that, she is trained at San Francisco State, and they have rooms there they're doing it and providing mental health for farm worker families, and it's really extraordinary and very much worth considering supporting.
Yeah, it's great. They actually received a grant through the Mental Health Services Act Innovation Fund for spearheading some of that, which is just fantastic.
Right. Yeah, I've seen the room. It's just wonderful, and she's doing now there's really no research on it at all, and so she's doing research as well, which is great. Before we wrap, I want to give you each one minute to sort of final thoughts, just two quick things. Social media and gender identity. We've alluded. Is there a resource around gender identity for parents if parents want to talk to someone because their kids are going through this? Is there a resource for parents that anyone can mention?
I would say in San Mateo County, there's the Pride Center, and that's housed in San Mateo with Star Vista in the same location. And that's a great resource. Also, I think it's related to the Mental Health Services Act funding initially, and it's received additional funding. I don't know all the details, but it's a great resource for parents, for kids, young adults.
Yeah.
I will also add adolescent counseling services. They specifically have the outlet program, and I think they have been a key partner in actually staffing that Pride Center. And when it comes to gender, SOGI training, as well as transgender issue, they're the go-to for both San Mateo and Santa Clara County. For those who live in Santa Clara County, there's also the LGBTQ through the family and children's services. But
I'm glad you mentioned adolescent counseling services. And someone mentioned it in the chat too. Yeah, certainly don't mean to leave them. I went to an event for them. It was a number of years ago, but I remember being, very, very impressed. So good to know.
They have the reputation when it comes to transgender, gender diversity issues. They are the go-to.
Yeah, we consult with them when needed.
Yeah.
And they're a founding member of Project Safety Net.
Great. Social media, do you want to mention quickly, and again, I think we'll have a follow-on topic of that, possibly with Jim Steyer from Common Sense Media. We did have a number of legislation this year, one that got defeated, but one that did get through. I mean, we have to force social media companies to be aware of children and start designing products differently. And that's really the intent of this legislation. Actually, in Korea and in Japan, they do have age verification. And the apps adjust to that. So they literally, and the UK actually now has this as well. So they'll say to say TikTok, you can't send messages to people of this age after 11 p.m. because it's not healthy. We don't want them to get notifications and about videos and other things. And so social media companies are having to do this already for other jurisdictions, certainly for Japan and Korea, but even in Great Britain as well, has been a leader in this space. So we did get one law through on this, which is having media companies be aware of children in their design. But I think there's certainly more work to be done there. We talked about some of the effects of social media. People alluded to it, and David, you addressed it directly, I think, in particularly around the eating disorder, right? And people having to, kids feeling they have to live up to these idealized images that they see online. So I just want to let you know that I am working on that. And I feel representing Silicon Valley with particular responsibility to work on those issues. I think here in this region and in this state. So now I'll give you each a minute to wrap up. Thank you. Thanks for all who participated, but thank you particularly to our panel. But why don't we start we'll start in the order that we led off. David, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, first, I think I'm walking out of this feeling hopeful because I've learned about a lot of resources I didn't know existed for parents and for kids. One I didn't mention, by the way, was the Trevor Project, which is a project for LGBTQ kids, particularly those who are suicidal. I could put that link in as well. But I think for parents, they need to know that there are multiple resources available that you may not be aware of, that are available through the school, the community. Sometimes the entree into treatment is through one of these websites, or contacting a school counselor, or contacting one of the programs that have been described. Mental health. The other thing, I think, on a hopeful note, some mental health problems, as severe as they are during teen years, straighten out in early adulthood when people go to college or go to the military or get in a relationship or whatever they do after high school. Sometimes you see them stabilizing from their moods and some of the anxiety symptoms they had earlier. So there's reason, I think, to be optimistic. that, with the proper support and care from the family, that the long-term outcome may be better than you think.
Great, thank you for that note. We do need some hope here. Mariko.
I'm also hopeful. I think what I've gotten from this, and I hope others have, is there's a multitude of resources, and that really there is no wrong door, and that if you make a call, there is someone compassionate that will help direct you to the right resource. So there is a shortage right now, but I've seen so many therapists that just step up to the plate to make sure that no one is left behind. And for that reason, I'm hopeful as well. And I'm hopeful that we continue these conversations. We can continue to bring more resources and help navigate it and make it easier for students, parents, and the overall community. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Great, Mary.
I will just say the power of community, the lived experience, and knowing that the more you share your stories, the more that you speak, and the more you ask, is the way we can change. And just to close out, I asked Carrie to post some resources about social media guidelines, both as professionals and some tips of how to manage it. So thank you again for this opportunity. May this just be the beginning of more meaningful work together.
Thank you. You are that seat belt that David referred to earlier. Chelsea.
So this has just been fantastic. I just wanted to thank you again, Josh, for including me in the parent perspective, and just everyone for all of these great resources. I have to say, in this space, I learn something every day, and today I feel lucky to have learned even more. And the support for our kids and our families, we're all in this together. And there shouldn't be a wrong door. I don't think there is. And we, if we need to do anything, it's support our families. It's just so important. So thank you again for hosting this, for being champion for this issue.
Well, thank you to all of you. We've gotten a lot of very nice comments. Obviously, we've got more work to do. I have more work to do, but I think people appreciate that we've put this forward. And just talking about this, another organization, Bring Change to Mind, is another organization that comes to mind, where that some other friends are involved with. So just bringing awareness and having the conversations itself is very important. And so for you all listening, to do that with your neighborhoods and your neighbors and with your families and your communities, to bring it out of the shadows where sometimes this topic has been, and to realize, and hopefully people realize, I mean, maybe in the pandemic, people realize now how prevalent this is, and that hopefully we're removing that stigma and encouraging others to seek help, and that we've also given resources. As I mentioned, and we'll send more about this, but at the state level, we really are putting a lot of attention to this with this youth mental health initiative. And again, it's really about the healthy minds for healthy kids, rebuilding the mental health systems, and then the mental health workforce, which is desperately needed. So I'm going to keep working on this. I just want to thank our panel, and you have all certainly made me more hopeful that we've got a sophisticated understanding, that we're looking at creative, that we're both matching people up to resources where needed, and also looking at lifestyle and some of those other places that can make an impact for our kids and for the youth in our community. So I am hopeful after this, and I appreciate all of you joining today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see you all at a town hall soon.
Thank you.